The morning of October 25th, 1415, dawned cold and grey, with the muddy fields of northern France soaked from days of heavy rain. On one side of this sodden landscape stood a small, beleaguered English army, weary from weeks of marching and battle, and on the other, a vast and confident French force, eager to crush their enemy. This was the Battle of Agincourt, a clash that would go down in history not just for its stunning outcome, but for the audacity, strategy, and sheer willpower that led a vastly outnumbered English army to one of the most famous victories of the 100 Years' War. To fully appreciate this remarkable event, we must go back to the beginning of the conflict and understand the stakes that led to this fateful day. The 100 Years' War was a series of conflicts between England and France, spanning from 1337 to 1453, driven by complex dynastic claims and territorial ambitions. At the heart of the conflict was the English monarchy's claim to the French throne, a legacy of the Norman conquest, and the intricate web of feudal allegiances that bound the English and French crowns. By the early 15th century, the war had already seen its share of bloody battles, shifting alliances, and periods of uneasy truce. It was during one of these lulls in the fighting that Henry V ascended the English throne in 1413. Young, ambitious, and determined to make his mark, Henry saw the war as a means to strengthen his hold on power and secure England's position in Europe. But more than that, Henry viewed it as his divine right to reclaim the French territories that had once been held by his ancestors. In 1415, Henry launched a daring invasion of France, landing with a force of around 12,000 men. His initial target was the port town of Harfleur, strategically located on the northern coast of France. The siege of Harfleur, however, proved more difficult than anticipated. The French defenders put up a fierce resistance, and the siege dragged on for over a month. By the time the town finally surrendered, the English army had been significantly weakened. Disease, particularly dysentery, had taken a heavy toll, reducing the fighting force to roughly half its original size. Despite these setbacks, Henry was determined to press on. His plan was to march his army across northern France to the English-held port of Calais, where they could regroup and prepare for further campaigns. But the French had other plans. The French nobility, stung by the fall of Harfleur and eager to avenge the humiliation, quickly assembled a large army to intercept the English. Led by Constable Charles d'Albret and a host of prominent French nobles, this force swelled to an estimated 20,000 to 30,000 men, including heavily armoured knights, men-at-arms, and crossbowmen. They were confident that they could easily overwhelm Henry's diminished army, and they set out to block his path. As the English marched through the rain-soaked countryside, the French shadowed their movements, waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment came near the village of Agincourt. The English, exhausted and hungry after weeks of marching, found their way barred by the French army, which had positioned itself between them and their destination. The stage was set for a battle that, by all accounts, should have ended in a disastrous defeat for the English. Outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and trapped in hostile territory, Henry's situation seemed dire. But Henry was not one to give up easily. Despite the overwhelming odds, he decided to make a stand. On the morning of the battle, Henry carefully arranged his forces. He chose his ground wisely, positioning his men on a narrow strip of land, flanked by dense woods on either side. This terrain would prove crucial, as it limited the ability of the French to deploy their superior numbers effectively. At the centre of his line were the English men-at-arms, heavily armoured foot soldiers who would bear the brunt of the French assault. But it was the English longbowmen, positioned on the flanks, who would play the decisive role in the battle. The English longbow was a formidable weapon, capable of firing arrows at great speed and with tremendous force. The longbowmen were highly trained, able to shoot up to 12 arrows per minute, and their arrows could pierce the armour of even the most heavily protected knights. To protect his archers from cavalry charges, Henry ordered them to drive wooden stakes into the ground in front of their positions, creating a defensive barrier. As the English prepared for battle, the French were confident of victory. They had the advantage in numbers, armour, and weaponry. But this confidence would prove to be their undoing. The French army was divided into 3 main divisions, or battles, with the first 2 consisting of mounted knights and men-at-arms, and the third composed of infantry and crossbowmen. The plan was simple. The first 2 divisions would charge the English lines, overwhelming them with sheer force, while the third division would mop up any resistance. But the plan quickly unravelled. The French knights, eager for glory, began advancing before the rest of the army was ready. As they moved forward, they found themselves funneled into the narrow space between the woods, unable to spread out and use their numbers to their advantage. The rain-soaked ground, churned into thick mud by the horses and men, slowed their advance to a crawl. As the French knights struggled forward, the English longbowmen began their work. Thousands of arrows darkened the sky, raining down on the advancing French with deadly accuracy. The heavy armor of the French knights, designed to protect them in close combat, became a liability as they were pelted by arrows from above. Horses stumbled and fell in the mud, throwing their riders to the ground. The once formidable French charge was reduced to chaos. Those who made it to the English lines found themselves bogged down in the mud, unable to move freely or wield their weapons effectively. The English men-at-arms, fighting with grim determination, cut down the French knights as they struggled to rise. The second wave of French knights fared no better. Seeing the carnage ahead of them, they hesitated, but the pressure from behind forced them forward. They too were met with a relentless hail of arrows and the fierce resistance of the English. By now, the battlefield was a scene of utter devastation, with bodies piling up in the mud, making it even harder for the French to advance. The third division, seeing the disaster unfolding before them, faltered and began to retreat. By the end of the day, the French army had been utterly defeated. Estimates of French casualties vary, but it is believed that between 7,000 and 10,000 French soldiers were killed, including many of the kingdom's nobility. In contrast, English losses were remarkably low, with fewer than 500 men killed. Among the dead were some of the most prominent figures in French society, including 3 dukes, 5 counts, and 90 barons. The French defeat at Agincourt was a catastrophic blow to the morale of the French nobility and a turning point in the 100 Years' War. For Henry V, the victory at Agincourt was more than just a military triumph. It was a validation of his claim to the French throne and a testament to his leadership and tactical skill. In the aftermath of the battle, Henry continued his campaign in France, eventually securing a treaty that recognized him as the heir to the French crown. Although his untimely death in 1422 would prevent him from realizing this ambition fully, his victory at Agincourt cemented his legacy as one of England's greatest warrior kings. The Battle of Agincourt also marked a significant shift in the nature of warfare. The dominance of heavily armored knights, which had defined European warfare for centuries, was now being challenged by new tactics and technologies. The success of the English longbowmen at Agincourt demonstrated the effectiveness of ranged weaponry and the importance of strategy and discipline over brute strength. The battle became a symbol of English resilience and ingenuity, celebrated in literature and legend for centuries to come. As we look back on the Battle of Agincourt, it is important to remember that this was not just a story of one battle, but a reflection of the broader struggles and changes that were reshaping medieval Europe. The 100 Years' War was a conflict that spanned generations, and its effects were felt far beyond the battlefield. Agincourt stands as a testament to the courage and determination of those who fought, but also as a reminder of the brutal realities of war and the fleeting nature of victory. In the end, the battle's true legacy lies not just in the glory of the moment, but in the lessons it teaches us about leadership, strategy, and the human spirit.